so bad that the most beloved man in sports got booed at a home game. Professor Jelly here, and today we're talking about the disastrous 2011-2012 Charlotte Bobcats, which has the worst winning percentage of any team in the history of the sport. Also, a quick disclaimer, I have no opinion on these teams whatsoever. So with that being said, unlike most other bad seasons of sports that rely solely on athletes playing poorly for them to be bad, there was a huge league-wide disaster that happened in 2011 that particularly hit Charlotte hard. That thing is, of course, the 2011 NBA lockouts. The NBA has had 4 lockouts in its history, where basketball was put on hold while players and owners argued over how much money the other should make. 3 of these lockouts were in short succession of each other in the 90s, and these things were absolute disasters for the league, souring the sport's reputation and costing the organization hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. After the last lockout in 1998, ticket sales didn't recover for years, and afterwards, nearly a third of basketball fans said that they had a lesser opinion of the sport for it. One of the big reasons why these lockouts were viewed so negatively is due to the fact that several fans thought that this was just some kind of big hissy fit thrown by rich, pampered athletes. One sports writer would end up describing the 1998 labor dispute as one between tall millionaires and short millionaires. However, many athletes would counter that it was ridiculous that the owners of the team were the ones making the majority of the profits when, the athletes were the ones who played. But either way, the owners were not exactly too eager to get into another player strike after the profits had just rebounded from the last one. So when the 6-year agreements from 1999 expired in 2005, owners signed one of the most lopsided contracts in NBA history to avoid another walkout, with players making over 57% of all league income. Now, this worked out great for the players, but the problems soon began to become apparent. By the time that the negotiations started in 2011 for a new contract, it didn't take no book learning to see that the owners were not going to be signing another one of these 57-43 splits. The league said that under the current deal, it was losing $300 million a year, and that 22 out of the 30 teams had lost money in the last season. And because there hadn't been any hard salary caps put on the players during the last negotiation, smaller teams like the Charlotte Bobcats were going bankrupt trying to compete with the larger franchises bidding for players. So in response, the owners demanded that the players' salaries be dropped from 57% all the way to 47%. So the owners all had different opinions on the nature of the lockout, but generally speaking, the owners of the larger, more profitable teams were more open to softer conditions, but the owners of the smaller, less profitable teams were much harder negotiators. When you know it, one of the hardline holdouts was the new Bobcats owner, Michael Jordan, who demanded that the league not negotiate past 50-50. This stance quickly turned MJ into one of the most hated people in the game, with dozens of articles and thousands of fans detesting him for what they viewed as a greedy stance. People got furious at Michael Jordan. I didn't even think that was possible. This is a guy who consistently makes the worst clothing choices known to man, and his shoes are still considered the peak of fashion. This is a man who showed up to a commercial shooting a Hitler stash, and a multinational company was like, he can be the face of our organization. But the hate makes a lot more sense when you consider that when Jordan was a player, he did the exact same thing. Like in 1995 when he told the Chicago Tribune, all the NBA commissioner has to do is evaluate the deal he has proposed to us from a player standpoint. He wouldn't recommend that. He wouldn't accept that deal from a business standpoint, so why should he ask the players to do that? These holdout responses began to build up animosity in Charlotte, which only increased as the season kept getting delayed. Finally, after 5 months of bickering and mudslinging, the two sides came to an agreement. Players would make between 49 to 51% of the league's income, a flexible salary cap would be imposed, and a harsher luxury tax would be put in place to hopefully help smaller teams. But even with the lockout over, many a bad taste sat in many a fan's mouth over the actions of the new Bobcats owner. With the lockout ended, the stage was set for the Bobcats to come in and remind everybody watching why they were the #1 NBA team in North Carolina. And they did just that by winning with the smallest possible margin of a single point, barely edging the Milwaukee Bucks out of a win on December 26th. It should be noted that the expectations for the Cats were already a little bit low going into the season, because even though they had made it to the playoffs only 2 years earlier, they had lost many of their best players in that time. But even so, many fans began to change their tune after this first victory. After all, they had went so much further than they should have last year, so maybe if Paul Silas could do more with less, maybe he can do even gooder with lesser. This could be the next Remember the Titans, a triumphant victory for all the Bobcat fans who had stayed true during the trying lockout. But this sweet taste of victory had the longevity of a stick of fruit stripe. Just long enough to get an unfortunate tattoo. 2 days later, Miami would come in to set the true tone of the season, kicking off the worst season of basketball ever. Charlotte would lose 3 more games before picking up an 8-point win against the Knicks on January 4th, which would be followed in turn by 6 more lost games, including a 30-point loss to the Hawks. Another 2-point buzzer beater would go to the Cats on January 14th due to a missed 3-pointer from Golden State's Klay Thompson. But this would be immediately followed by a 16-game losing streak. 16 games! One of the worst in history. Fans were sick. They had waited so long to see their favorite team play, and their best scorer, Gerald Henderson, barely made 15 points a game. For reference, in Wilt Chamberlain's best season, he made over 50. As a result, the team had the worst offense in the league, and the worst 3-point percentage, and the worst defense. Dozens of games were complete blowouts. But hold on. Moon had a sick 100% free throw average. I mean, he only played 8 games, but I mean, sheesh. In fact, looking over the roster, it's not exactly hard to see why the season went the way it went. Most of these players ended up retiring or playing overseas shortly afterwards. And poor Paul Silas has never coached another game after being fired at the end of the season. The losing streak finally ended on February 17th when they beat the Toronto Raptors, and over the next month they had the best luck of the entire season. You know, they won 4 games. Granted, there was 14 games in that period, but who's counting? Just let them play, coach. Just let them play. But that second win over Toronto would be the last time a Bobcats fan would be able to go home with their head held high. After March 17th, the Charlotte Bobcats, for the rest of the season, would never win again. This means that you could have bet $1 million on Charlotte losing every single night, and every single night you would have won. While a 23-game straight loss is not the longest losing streak ever, it is the longest at the end of the season. Even the other contender for the worst ever team, the 72-73 76ers, great name, who very much deserve their own episode, only lost the last 13 games of their season. This was an absolute death march to the finish line. Surprise, surprise, the Bobcats didn't make it to the playoffs this year. Their last game was a home game against the New York Knicks. Even more surprising, they didn't win this game either. In the last few minutes of this war crime of a match, with Charlotte 20 points down, a camera operator, presumably trying to get the attention off the disaster on the floor, switched to one of the skyboxes and zoomed in on the until then missing Michael Jordan. Usually Jordan can almost always be found at the end of the Bobcats bench at home games, but it seemed that after the worst season on record, which was about to be capped with even another loss, his airness was ashamed to show his face on the court. And with the elusive owner finally in view, choruses of boos erupted from the stands, exclaiming their hatred for the worst season of basketball of all time. And so the man who is widely considered to be the best athlete of all time was booed at a home game in his home state. After the dust settled, fans wiped away their tears and turned to the only thing that they had left, the future. The one good thing about being the worst team in the league is you got a pretty good chance of getting that first round draft pick. And the unibrow messiah that everybody was looking for was Anthony Davis. Truly, this was a man that could save a franchise. And if ever there was a franchise that needed saving, it was the Charlotte Bobcats. But sometimes, kids, dreams don't come true. And as the ping pong balls were pulled and the cards were opened for the 2012 NBA draft, someone might as well have just went over and decked an orphan with a Bobcats jersey in the face. Because against all odds, the New Orleans Hornets came in first and stole away Anthony Davis. Ooh, that pain. That hurts. That hurts. There's a few root causes that get mentioned when trying to figure out why everything went so wrong. The biggest is obviously the lockout, which threw the entire momentum of the season off. Every other team was also dealing with these logistical problems, but it only amplified Charlotte's loss of their biggest players over the past 2 seasons, which left aging veterans and inept greenhorns to pick up the pieces. But I think that the biggest problem was the management's miscalculation of throwing away an entire season just in the hopes of getting a better draft pick, which didn't work out anyways. Today on the 10-year anniversary, the 2011-2012 season of the Charlotte Bobcats stands as a true low water point in professional sports, where a team went from the playoffs to the worst ever within 2 seasons, serving as a tale of warning about trying to tank for better draft picks in the process. The Bobcats did end up doing better in later seasons, and some people claim that if this had been just, a regular uninterrupted season, they would have won a few more games. However, other people say that the short season was the best thing going for them because there wasn't no winning in sight. Either way, this season is definitely part of the reason why the Bobcats rebranded to the Hornets. All the people involved later went on record to state their disappointment with how the season went. And I have to say, it's just one record that no team ever wants to beat. This has been Professor Jelly. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe.